So if the user clicks on sort and uses this sort functionality and clicks done, the entries are in the correct order in our local entries array. However, if we look at the entries table on Supabase, these order numbers have not been updated. And that means that if we reload the page here, then the entries are back in the original order. So what we need to do is once the user has finished sorting and let go, we need to actually update all of these order number properties in the entries table on Supabase. Just to make it a bit easier to see what's going on here, I'm just going to display these order numbers next to the entry names. So I'm going to jump to the Explorer and jump to Source, Components, Entries, and Entry.View, which is the component for an individual entry. And I'm going to scroll down a bit to where the entry name is being displayed here. Let's also display the order number in parentheses here. So I'll add parentheses, then double curly braces, and add entry.order and save that. And we can see these order numbers next to each name. Help me out with a quick like, comment, share, or subscribe. Let's jump back to storeentries.js and this sort end action. So when the user clicks on sort and drags one of these entries and lets go, this sort end action is triggered, and this is going to receive the old index of the entry that was moved and the new index. And this is coming from the Sortable plugin. This is just making a copy of the entry that was moved. Then it's removing the entry from the old index in the array from its original position, and then putting it back in at the new index at the new position that the entry was moved to. So at this point here, all of the entries in our local entries array are in the correct order. So what we could do here is fire a new method. We could call this update entry order numbers. Let's create this method above this one. So const update entry order numbers equals an arrow function. So first of all, let's get these order numbers correct in our local entries array before we write those order numbers to Supabase. And since we know that the entries array is in the correct order at this point, then we could just loop through the entries array and set these order properties. So 1 for the first item in the array, 2 for the second item in the array, etc. So let's add a variable called current order so we can keep track of the current order number and set this to 1. And then let's loop through our entries array. So let's add entries.value to grab the entries array and add a for each method. Let's use entry for the placeholder as it's looping through this array. And all we want to do is set entry.order equal to current order. So for the first entry in the array, it's going to set this to 1. But for the second entry in the array, we want to set this to 2. So we can just increment this current order variable with current order plus plus, which will add 1 to current order. So let's save this and reload and see if this is working. So we can see the order property values here, 1, 2, and 3. And if I reorder this item and let go, we can see the entry orders in our local entries array being updated to the correct numbers. So our order numbers are being updated correctly locally. If we drag and reorder, they're all set to 1, 2, 3, etc. However, we still need to update these order numbers on Supabase, because if we reload, these order numbers are set because we only changed them in our local entries array. So let's jump to the Supabase API docs and full screen this. Let's jump down to update rows. So one thing we could do is loop through all of the entries in our local entries array and fire an update query like we're doing when the user edits the name or the amount. However, if we scroll up a bit, we can actually update all of the entries at once with a single query using the UPSERT. And an UPSERT will update all of the matching rows in the table based on the criteria specified here. If the row exists, and if it doesn't exist, then it's going to insert a new row, which is why it's called UPSERT. So this is going to either update or insert, depending on whether the row exists or not. So let's copy this example and jump back to storeentries.js. Let's paste this after this for each loop. Because we're using await, let's make this function async. So an UPSERT will update all of the rows specified in this UPSERT method. And we can actually add an array of updates here. So if I delete this object and put an array in here, we could do something like this. We could create an object and specify the ID of the row we want to update. Let's say ID 1. And then we can specify any columns that we want to update on that row. So we could set order to 1. Then we could add another object here and select the row with the ID of 2 and set the order to 2. And actually, these should be integers, not strings. What was I thinking? So what we could do is use the map function to loop through our local entries array and create an array of objects just like this with the entry ID and the order number. So let's just comment out this query while we set that up. So we could create a constant called entries UPSERT and set this equal to our entries array, entries.value, fire the map method on this and use entry as the placeholder as it's looping through. And we just want to return an object with the ID and order numbers from this entry. So we could just return an ID property set to entry.id and return an order property set to entry.order. Let's log this out and make sure it looks okay. So I'll just log out entries UPSERT, save that, jump back to Moneyballs, reload, clear the console, click on sort, and reorder these, let go. And we can see this entries UPSERT array being logged out. And we can see all of the objects with the IDs and the order number. So now we can just pass this object to our UPSERT query. So let's remove this console log and uncomment this code. And we can just select this array, which we hard coded, and replace this with entries UPSERT. Let's make sure we're handling errors before we test this. So if error, we'll use our composable show error message. We could just display could not update entry order numbers on Supabase. To test this error, let's just set this entries table name to a table that doesn't exist. Reload, click on sort and drag these around. And we see that error dialog. So now let's correct this table name. And I don't think we're going to need the data array here. So let's remove that and save this. Let's see if it's working. And I'll stick this over on the left and get our entries table on the right. Stretch this out a bit. So we have 3 entries here. 1, which has the order number set to 1. 2, which has 2. 3, which has 3. So now let's click on sort and reorder these entries and let go. And we see an error. I might just need to reload. So let's reload that. Click on sort, drag and let go. What's going on here? I didn't save the file. So let's save that and reload once again. Click on sort and drag these around. And we don't see an error. And if I refresh the table on Supabase, we can see the order numbers have been updated correctly. So the 2 entry is set to 1, the 1 entry is set to 2, and the 3 entry is set to 3. So now if we reload our app, these entries should be in the order 2, 1, and 3. So I'll reload, and yeah, they're all in the correct order. Before we move on, let's just remove these order numbers that we displayed. So let's jump to entry.view and remove this bit here and save that. In the next module of this course, available at makeappsacademy.com, you'll get to create this beautiful login and register page. Next, you'll add Supabase authentication to the app so that users can log in, register, and log out. You'll restructure the database to handle multiple users and make sure the app works correctly for multiple users. You'll add navigation guards to the app to prevent a logged out user from getting to the entries page and prevent a logged in user from getting to the auth page. Next, you'll add row-level security and policies to protect your users' data and make sure each user can only access and modify their own data. Next, you'll add database functions and triggers to the app and use these to display the total number of entries created with Moneyballs on the login page. You'll learn about Supabase storage and use it to allow each user to upload an avatar and display this in the app. Next, you'll learn how to take your entire Supabase instance and run it locally, including importing all of your database tables, storage buckets, row-level security, and learn how to make changes locally and push them to your live Supabase instance. Next, you'll learn about edge functions. You'll create an edge function which displays a random greeting to the user along with the total number of entries they've created. And finally, you'll get money balls built for production and working for web, iOS, Android, Mac, and Windows. Go to makeappsacademy.com and click on the course Supabase and Vue 3, or click the link in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.